Just a note before we start. Our show talks about touchy subjects that may be difficult for some of our listeners. Take care of yourself. If you feel you need to seek help, see the links at the end of our show notes for resources.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Such a Subjects podcast, the podcast that aims to break the silence that tends to come with conversations around domestic and sexual violence. I'm Sean.
And I'm Amanda.
And today we're going to be talking about safety and conflict with our special guest, Aubrey Aust. So thank you for joining us again today, Aubrey.
Thank you so much for having me back. I missed you guys.
We missed you too.
Yes, we're so glad we could get you back on the podcast. If you did not hear our first episode with Aubrey last season, go and check that one out after this one. But for those of you who do not know who Aubrey is, Aubrey, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to our audience?
I'd love to. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name's Aubrey Aust. I am a researcher and master's candidate at NYU studying relational psychology and philosophy. So, what the heck does that actually mean? I study the psychology and lived experience of what actually happens to us within connection. So, what that does to things like our nervous systems, our sense of self, and ultimately, I'm trying to figure out how we can better show up for ourselves and others. So, I love talking about all of the nuance and all the fun stuff within connection. And I'm super grateful to be here with Sean and Amanda today to get into that.
Yeah, it's great having you on because I was like, this is your shit, right? Like you're in this every day. This is you have chosen to study. And while Amanda and I, in our expertise as talking about like healthy relationships and stuff, can talk about connection, it is fun having you come on to be like, this is like legitimately like how people's brains work and like this is how this happens. So it is fun having somebody come give credence to a lot of the things that we say. And we're not
Hey,
just making it
together,
up.
we're the dream team together. I love it.
We are. It's great. So, like we said, Aubrey, we are here today to talk about safety and conflict, in part because coming up soon for a lot of us, especially those in the United States, Thanksgiving is coming up right around the corner, and then followed by the winter holidays. So, for a lot of us, we're about to be forced into spaces with family, with friends, with some people who we may love but not genuinely want to be around a whole lot. So, what is it about going back into those spaces that can be difficult for people, and how can we help kind of like navigate those a little bit?
Yeah, you said it perfectly about naming that nuance of knowing we can very much love these people who are around. We know we want to be in connection with them in some capacity, but also realizing that a lot can come up for us within those situations. And there might be a lot of layers to that. It might be returning to a specific location or environment that has a lot packed in for you, or it might be a relationship with a specific person, family member, friend that, yeah, you can maintain when there's a certain amount of distance, but face to face is a whole other dynamic, right? So it's knowing and living within that conflict of, yes, I want to be here. I want to show up and be here for these people in during these times, but also acknowledging, hey, there's a lot kind of going on within me when I think about these situations and what can I do about that? And, the holidays are admittedly an interesting time because there is that expectation of we need to gather with these, people who we feel close to. And there's something so beautiful about chosen family and, picking and choosing what that looks like. And sometimes we will be in situations where we have to navigate some connections that may not be easy breezy. That's okay. It's okay to sit with that conflict. And today we're going to get into some tools, some conversations, kind of talk about what that looks like so that way we can go into those situations feeling a little more grounded within ourselves.
Yeah, I know with a lot of families, the holidays are the times where you see people that you maybe don't have to see the rest of the year, right? Like all of a sudden it's your grandparents and your aunts and uncles and your cousins twice removed, and you've got this whole house full of people, and in my family, at least a million screaming children. Um, And that is an environment that is set up for explosions, even in the best of circumstances. So you add some family drama, I say that in quotation marks because that's just the way we refer to it, right? Conflict isn't necessarily drama, but uh you throw that in there, and then you've got people just like waiting to jump on those things. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think it'll be really helpful for so many of our viewers and for myself included. And I can't wait to just hear all this stuff. So,
I think one of the things you said in there too, Amanda, really gets me kind of thinking about how people tend to view conflict too. Is like we're viewing conflict as something that has to be negative, right? But that's not what conflict is. It's like we have conflicts all the time. We have issues with our bosses at work. We have issues with our friends sometimes. We have issues with family. We have conflicts inside of ourselves all the time. So I think a lot of this helps, we can help people if we can reframe how we think about conflict a little bit. Because if we're thinking about conflict as something negative, then yeah, we're going to want to avoid it. We don't want to deal with things that we don't like or things that are bad or things that we're deeming as bad. But if we're viewing conflict a little bit differently and viewing it as more of a how can we grow in this moment or how can we use this as an opportunity to learn about each other, I think that does actually kind of help people start to feel more comfortable with conflict. And I don't know if that's correct or not, but the expert here, I'm sure, will.
chime in on it.
I'll take it. I completely agree that conflict should not be framed as inherently negative. That is absolutely a place where we can come and see a lot of growth within ourselves, within our relationships, and seeing that as an opportunity to actually get closer to someone. Because when that conflict arises, we're seeing that, yes, the self is not the other, right? We are never fully going to be mirrored by our connections. That's a lot of the times when conflict arises. Okay, you have a different perspective than me. You see the world differently than I do. And so, what can we do to try to better understand each other in those circumstances and see their approach as the way they are moving through the world with their lived understanding, their experiences? All of our experiences pile up to give us this perspective that we go into these conversations with, right? So, thinking about conflict, and especially when we're talking about kind of the stuff that happens during the holidays, Amanda, like you said, these people might not be people we see regularly. First and foremost, what I would advise is go in knowing your tolerance level for this. If great 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 Uncle Ed makes a remark that, doesn't hit you right, but this is someone you see every once in a blue moon and you are not in a space to educate on, something that might reframe his perspective on this and have a really long drawn out conversation about it, you can choose to maybe say, hey, this is what I think about it, and then move on from that conversation. However, if it's someone in your life where you feel like I would really like this person to gain a better understanding of how I think and feel about this, that's a great opportunity to have those conversations. And we were talking about this before. Sean and Amanda and I were chatting about how we often mistake safety for comfort. But psychological safety is something completely different. It's the ability to tolerate that difference without fear of complete disconnection. And so conflict in that sense, it's not the opposite of safety. It's kind of testing it. It's saying, what can we do to navigate that difference without fear of this connection entirely burning out? And that's something that we build over time.
And you also mentioned something that I think is really important for people like myself, where I always constantly feel like I'm in the batter's box, just like waiting to go up to bat. Like I'm not one to shy away from like those conflicts because like my job leads me to want to educate and help people. And especially if it's my family or if it's people who see during the holidays, it's like these are people that I'm obviously spending time with. And especially if it's my family members, I want to see my family members like grow. I want to see them improve upon themselves. So I'm wanting and willing to educate them. That does not mean they are willing to hear it. Um, and that doesn't also mean that we are ever going to we're in a space at that point when that conflict does potentially arise that we're both going to be able to do it. The holidays, especially in my family, tends to lead to a lot of drinking. So when you're drinking, you're not going to want to learn anything. Also, probably not the best spot for someone like myself to try and educate as well. So I think it's understanding what your tolerance level of that is really important because, yeah, if you're going into this just waiting for the shoe to drop, for you to jump in to have this conflict or to try and educate somebody in this moment, you're also then not going to be able to just enjoy the time that you're there. You're always going to be on edge looking for that moment of when do I need to jump in?
Mhm.
And that's also not a great way to just kind of like manage your relationships or manage the time that you're spending there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's such a good point. You can really only meet someone where they are at. And so coming into those conversations with that awareness that yes, you can have those conversations, but one, first evaluate what your tolerance and capacity are because these conversations, while so important, can also be draining. This can be a very emotionally taxing season for a lot of reasons. So it's great to do a little self check in and say, hey, maybe I don't have the capacity to fully, educate to this sense today. That's okay. What looks like it can be a situation where I can honor myself and stand up for my needs, but also still enjoy my time here and participate this in this to the degree that feels good to me. And also taking into consideration that, the again, other person comes in with all of their experiences, their lived day to day, and seeing what that conversation can look like within that context. And that's kind of a great mindset that sets us up really well just to kind of manage expectations in these situations.
Right. I mean, we've got like, this is kind of a cliche, but time and place, right? Like,
Yeah.
there needs to, these conversations, sure, they might need to happen, but there's a time and a place that they need to happen. And sitting around the Thanksgiving table while everybody's, a case of beer in is probably not the time and place to do it. And you have to be able to know yourself enough to say, this is where I'm just going to keep my mouth shut right now. And that might feel like you're doing a disservice to yourself, right? Because we want to stand up for these things. We want to protect ourselves in these situations. But if it's not going to do any good, and you know that going in, you're just causing yourself more grief in that moment. You're not there specifically for great 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 Uncle Ed, right? You're there for your cousins, your kids, your siblings, whatever. You're there for those people. So focus on that and focus on the things you can enjoy in that situation and let the other shit go.
And this can be hard too for people, especially like myself, who genuinely believes like remaining silent in that moment like may only help further potential harm, or remaining silent only helps basically like err on the side of like now I'm agreeing with this person because I'm not saying anything. You can still say things, but if this isn't going to serve you in this moment, text them the next day. Like, hey, this came up yesterday, and then kind of go from there and have the conversation one on one instead of in front of everybody else at this gathering. And while we're also kind of talking about this in the framing of like holidays, this works for everything else too, right? Like you're in a meeting at work and one of your coworkers says something, and you're like, ooh, I don't agree with that and I don't like it. Talk to them afterward instead of putting
Mhm.
them on blast in front of everybody. Because in that moment, like if you're putting them on blast, they may get defensive. But if you're talking to them one on one, you may be able to further that relationship while also putting them more in a space where they're willing to hear you instead of feeling like, well, now I need to be defensive and defend myself against this amongst everybody else.
Yeah, and that's another thing with people. People come in hot in situations like that, right? Like you said something shitty, and I am going to tell you what I think about it. Take a breath, take a step back. Coming in with an aggressive tone isn't going to help the situation at all. You're not going to be able to have a learning conversation if that person is feeling personally attacked by their thoughts and beliefs that they have grown with. Yeah, they might be shitty thoughts and beliefs, but they're still theirs. And we gotta take those breaths sometimes and say, when is this conversation going to be the best for everybody?
100%. I am so big on really truly trying to see intent behind someone's whatever they say. However, in these cases and in these conversations, we have to come in with the understanding that, of course, the other person is naturally going to get defensive. Because, especially, Sean has a very good comment that you made, is this can apply to a lot of different situations, but especially in those where there is that interpersonal relationship, whether it's familial or someone that you're already close with. Yeah, there's a connection there. And this can be someone that you love and can have complicated feelings towards as well. Two truths can coexist there. And so when we come at it from a perspective of, I would really just like you to understand me and see me here, that's an invitation to let them further into us and enhance that relationship instead of, you just said something really awful and I want to tell you why. Very valid to hold that feeling, especially if it is a super hurtful comment, but that's not gonna land. And so pacing ourselves in those situations, knowing our emotional capacity, but also just general awareness of what tactics in terms of messaging or conversations actually genuinely get through to someone.
And it can be hard for people to figure out how to do too, because like Amanda said, like you get heated. It's like you're
Yeah.
immediately like, hey, that was shitty. Like, what the fuck? But it was a phrase that like one of our guests have used, and I've used it. I started using it more often too. Is like, help me understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because instead of coming at them saying like, hey, that was bad, like help me understand why you think that. Because then you're starting to get at, like you said, Aubrey, getting at their intent. Why do they believe this? What is it about that statement that they think is true or they hold to be true? So that way we can start having a better conversation of understanding where they're coming from. Because they're coming at it from the purposes of just being hateful and hurtful. Like there's nothing you're going to say to that person that's going to be able to change their mind in that moment, right? Their intent was to be hurtful. So yeah, if their intent's to be hurtful, they just kind of suck. But if they're coming at it from a lack of understanding or a lack of experiences or a lack of knowledge on the subject, like we can work with that. But if they get defensive about it, they're not going to be willing to work with you.
A fun little thing I've been sprinkling in my conversations recently is when someone precedes a statement with no offense, but I like to stop them and say, well, is this comment intended to be offensive? Because if you're trying to offend me, sure, like let's just present it as such. We don't need to frame it as no offense. And then if they say, well, no, I'm not, then I'm like, well, maybe rephrase it in a way that doesn't come across as offensive. And it almost, if you say it in the right tone, it can turn into more of a joking, lighthearted moment. But that can be a fun little just tapping the brakes of knowing I might get triggered by what this person is about to tell me. So can we kind of joke, make a little banter about this to de-escalate a situation before it starts?
Yeah, some of the worst comments you're ever going to hear in life are going to be prefaced by saying, "No offense, but,"
I
um,
always know I'm like, something
or
juicy's coming after this.
Yeah.
"Don't take this the wrong way,
Right.
but."
There was a meme that I saw and it was basically that. It was like, now I'm not racist, but I was like, okay, so why did you feel the need to preface the statement then? Like, is what you're gonna say racist? But you don't want you want to make sure that I don't think you're racist by prefacing like I'm not racist, but
Yeah, because that little statement just covers anything they're gonna say
yeah,
after, right? They can't
like
possibly offend.
like if you're prefacing it with that or like I don't mean any offense by this, but
But
like figure out a different way to say it. Or if the intent is to be harmful, like don't preface it then. Like you're just lying to yourself at that point because if you're gonna say something hurtful to somebody, but you're prefacing it with like I don't mean to be hurtful, but that
no,
doesn't
exactly. I'm
negate.
like, just own it. Like if you want to harm, okay. Don't try to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
It makes them feel better about it. Like their intent is to make you feel bad about it, but they don't want to feel bad about having made the statement. So
Exactly.
they can say that no offense, but here's a really shitty comment about you.
Mm-hmm.
No offense, but your hair looks like shit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
I do
pretty
almost
sure that was supposed to be offensive.
I also just feel like those are like the statements that come after that too are like obviously gonna be offensive and hurtful. I'm like, they're never creative, right?
True.
Like if you're gonna be hurtful, at least be creative in how you're gonna hurt me. Like I work with middle schoolers, like they're creative, all right? Like,
That's your baseline. No
yeah.
one can get to Sean. He works with middle school.
No, dude, if a middle schooler is going to offend you, like they're going to say some of like the most out of pocket kind of comments and they're going to be creative and funny.
They're
So at least
genius.
if you're going to hurt me, at least make it funny, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Can't break this one.
plus the way that my friends and I just communicate with each other also is if you looked at our group chats, you're like, these people hate each other.
Like,
So
no, this is how we show love.
it is. It is.
It is. Yeah.
My friends, if we're overly nice to each other, we're like, are you okay?
Do we need to check in?
And there's also it's also like a decent kind of segue into like the boundaries and stuff that we were talking about too when it comes to like safety and conflict because like those comments like that I make to my friends and my friends make to me sound like conflicts. But the boundaries that we've established with our friends, like we know what things we can and cannot joke about, right? So we've established those boundaries. So we'll make the jokes to each other because we know we can all take it. Well, most of us can take it. Uh, the ones that can't take it are the ones that tend to get targeted a bit more too because it's just funny watching us trigger them. Because they'll dish it, they just can't receive it. Um, but understanding like what boundaries we have like allows us to have like these kind of conversations. Like we also understand that because of the boundaries that we've set, we know what things we can't joke about, that if those topics come up, we can be like, hey, like, are you good? And we know how we can check in with our friends. We know what potential things that we have are dealing with because we're willing to have those conversations about what boundaries we were setting and what things we can and can't joke about.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a fancy schmancy term that we can use to talk about this. It's called affect theory. And it's basically the interregulation, the response that we have to each other. We can see it and sense it a lot when we are in physical proximity with people. Like, have you ever been in a room, you're just chilling, having a good day, all of a sudden someone walks in and you just completely tense up and your entire body and sense of self changes? They haven't even said anything, but you just know that person gives a certain physiological reaction to you. Well, we can also have that with words, with text messages. You're just going along, minding your business. All of a sudden, you read a text message from someone, and you're like, what the hell? Your entire demeanor changes, right? That's affect. That's how we play with each other, which can be fun. It can also be really scary to our nervous systems, completely depending on the context. How are we processing that relationship? And how do we naturally engage in what can be banter or what can be, I have not so great feelings for this person? So, as you said, like you with your friends, there's that natural camaraderie, that build up, that constant back and forth playfulness, right? That's part of your relationship. You wouldn't text in the group chat and ask for consent to make a stupid joke about someone. You have that level with them that, like, hey, this will probably land. And if it doesn't, there's enough safety built up here that we can talk about it. They're
Mhm.
your friends. You love them. You don't want to harm them. But it's getting to that point with people that we have to know we are within that dynamic bubble. That is different for every relationship, every group, every dynamic. That's why this work is so nuanced and fun, and I will never run out of things to research here, right? So it's in those moments where something does get triggered, something doesn't land, knowing that we have the possibility to repair and thinking, what does that look like? And if you were like me, you're a fixer, you want everything to be good, we want to be happy, we want to sit in our good feelings. Well, unfortunately, that ain't life, right? Any relationship will experience likely some form of rupture, tiny or something bigger. And so in those moments, it's not about returning to normal. It's about thinking, what does safety look like here after something has been shaken? And it might not look like exactly what it was before, and that's okay. You can have a lot of feelings coming up around that of, hey, I'm kind of grieving this old state, or a lot of uncertainty of, is this person ever going to love me like they did before, see me the way they did before, and just feel kind of shaken within. But knowing that what matters is what we can do next in these situations. Can we stay open even after we have been hurt or after we have hurt someone else? Even if we have the best intentions, that can still happen. And in that moment, that choice to stay in connection instead of shut down, that's where resilience starts. That's how we really build that authenticity with each other and say, yo, even I did not mean this how it came across, and I want to better understand your experience. I want to love you and see you exactly where you are in this. And that's where we can start to kind of mend those wounds and stay in connection while pain is present.
That I think is something that we as a society really need to focus on, right? Because we've gotten to this point where, and sometimes it's completely valid because you can't necessarily stay in relationships with people who continue to harm you.
Right.
Um, but there is a place in our lives where we can be uncomfortable with the relationship, but still have a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes being in that conflict in ourselves is something we just have to start learning how to work through. It doesn't mean escape from every situation that gives you a bad vibe, because the world is full of the bad vibes and we can't escape everybody all the time. That's not good for us either. Um, so, you can have your people, your friend group, your chosen family who you can feel that comfort with all the time, but you still have to venture into some of those relationships that have the uncomfort level too. And sometimes that uncomfort level can help us learn something new about people or learn what their view is or learn where they're coming from with it. And if they're willing and able, then maybe it helps that other person learn from you too. Um, Now I know we have a lot of people in our lives who were just like, that person's not willing to learn or grow or see things from my perspective. They only want me to see it from theirs. So, how can we approach those situations when we know in our heads that XYZ person is not going to change their stance, is not going to try and see things from our point of view? How can we go into those situations and still try and keep ourselves safe, even if it's uncomfortable?
Yeah, such a great point. And in those situations, it's about taking care of ourselves first and foremost. Knowing that you can talk until you're blue in the face, and that point is just not going to land. Maybe because where that person is at in life, the context in which you approach the conversation, you just know in that moment it ain't gonna happen, right?
Hmm.
So when we check in with ourselves there before going into that space, it can really help to pre-regulate. This can mean, grounding exercises like breathing, even visualizing the internal ally, like someone you feel all the warm fuzzies with, someone you feel really safe with, knowing that this could be a person you can talk to after, and telling yourself that I don't have to abandon myself in this situation. And so during those difficult moments, like think of micro boundaries you can put in. Stuff that's not an explicit, we are not talking about this. Sometimes if the situation calls for it, you might need that, but there are more subtle ways, like just pausing before responding or redirecting the attention. If someone asks you something really stupid, counter them with a question. And if you just take that spotlight off of you and get the conversation and the energy flowing in a different direction, this conversation isn't going anywhere. You might have not have the emotional tolerance for it. It's just a waste of breath, right? In those situations, get it flowing elsewhere. Answer questions with questions and keep turning that spotlight. And that takes the pressure off of you. That gives you some time to reground, to take those deep breaths, to play with the cute nieces and nephews and get caught up in all the childhood screaming. A lot of things probably going on. And so in those moments, self-care is not indulgent. This is a way of ensuring that our bodies are not holding more than we can carry safely. And that is so important.
One of the things that I found has at least been helpful for me is like with those establishing boundaries of like who's going to be at these events, what things am I going to be okay with communicating with them, or am I okay with communicating with them at all? Is it going to go beyond like, hey, how are you? Like, good to see you, like happy Thanksgiving, and kind of like keeping that conversation there, like very like elevatory with a person you don't want to talk to kind of situation versus like the in-depth conversations that I will have with other people at this event. I have some of my cousins, love talking to them, love hanging out. Like that's fine. There are some family members and I'm like, I'm not going to really get past surface level conversations here because I know as soon as we do, like I'm going to get in conflict and I don't want that. So not necessarily like avoiding conflict, but understanding what boundaries I have. I'm like, I'm not here to educate. I'm not here to have these conversations. I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not working right now. So let me keep that boundary established for myself and then just kind of like go elsewhere.
Right. It's almost like a little bit of self-preservation, right? Like I know that I don't want to start a conflict, have an argument with these people. So let's keep it light. And that can be if you have a family who you know that there is a lot of conflict in, especially right now surrounding maybe like politics or things like that. You know what? Let's all have a conversation beforehand if that's possible and say, we're not going to talk about politics at Thanksgiving because it's just too heated. I want to talk about what sport your kid is playing in. I want to talk about what you got from your significant other for Christmas. Or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, what did you do for your birthday? Those are the things I want to talk about. Those are the things I want to know. I don't want to know who you voted for or what you think about our foreign policies or what you blah 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 blah. Because I know we're not going to align on it and I know this isn't the time to try and have that hash out.
Yeah, Amanda, that's such a good point. I think it's essential to kind of go in with that mindset. And something I want to say that I think the three of us and a lot of these listeners might resonate with is I know we are activists in a lot of ways. We want to help and we want to educate and do all the things, right? And a lesson that I have been learning and am still learning is we cannot fight and win every single battle here. You have to preserve your own emotional energy and sanity in these situations. And learning what that looks like. And you, in doing so, you can then go on and place your energy in places where you can have more of these conversations and with people who are open to listening. And at the end of the day, the space for this dialogue doesn't exist without trust. And the more that we fundamentally connect with the simple humanity of one another, the more that space will open. And that doesn't mean coming in blazing talking about the latest election, the latest news headline, whatever, with people you don't see on a regular basis or you don't even have that, level with. It's saying, hey, what are your kids up to? What did you do this weekend? What Starting with the little things and seeing the humanity within each other. And not only does that make gatherings like this a lot more pleasant, but it also sets a general foundational baseline that opens us up to those more difficult conversations later on in the line.
And that seeing other people like with humanity, right? Like I feel like is a piece that's continually being lost. Um, Regardless of like what your political beliefs or systems are, is like consistently they are being pitted against each other, right? It's always them versus us. That is the messaging that you're resoundly getting. It's like Democrats are doing this, Republicans are doing this. While there may be a sense of truth to those statements, that's lumping them all together. So it's like anybody who votes that way is like, that's a them, not an us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're losing the ability to see each other as the individuals. We're only seeing them, and this is a conversation we always have when it comes to biases and stereotypes. We're only seeing them for labels that we're putting on them.
Right.
So if I'm going in with the belief like all Republicans are bad, all Republicans they voted for this, so they all believe the same things. Like I'm missing the opportunity to see these as individuals. Like why? So we have to recognize like each person is an individual. Each person is not just a list of labels that are being attributed to them. And as soon as we figure that out, it starts to make these conversations be a little bit easier and less of a this is going to be a fight because we're no longer seeing that person as an enemy. We're not seeing them as a them. We're seeing them as a person.
Yeah. I have an interesting little psychology nibble that has really helped me in viewing how I view identity as the concept itself, but also understanding how others see themselves, right? Because I'm only looking from this perspective right here. I will never be able to fully understand another person as hard as I try. And so in psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic frameworks, the self, and when I say the self, I mean who we are seeing ourselves as, our own sense of identity, is entirely built on this concept called passionate attachments. We as humans, we are wired to attach to each other, to sometimes to labels, to desires, to ideas. I am a this political party. I am a son, daughter, friend. All these different things can be considered passionate attachments. And so who we consider ourselves to be is a sum of those passionate attachments, of how strongly we identify with those labels, concepts, whatever it may be. And at the end of the day, those ebb and flow, right? There's still this like capital S self that can look a lot of different ways based on your philosophical, religious beliefs. But when we strip down all that stuff, we're still all humans at our core. And so when we're getting really fired up about something, when someone else is getting really fired up about something, you can say, okay, that's a passionate attachment right there, right? And seeing that and acknowledging that within the other person, and also realizing, hey, there is a fundamental nature here that we can connect on. What does that look like for us right now?
I think something that kind of goes along with that is understanding that when people have those labels, when someone has that I'm a Republican label, or we put that label on someone, with the people that we're close with, we tend to say, well, they're a Republican, but they're a Democrat, but. And it's the same thing with that no offense, but, right? Like I say, well, my sister is a Republican, but she doesn't have XYZ belief that I don't like that other Republicans might have. And we're just thrown into those labels where we want to like throw an umbrella over everybody and say this is what they all think, feel, see, hear, whatever. And if we can start looking at it as I'm willing to look at the individual person if it's someone that I'm close with, why can't we look at the individual person of someone that we're maybe not as close with
Mm-hmm.
and start to see them as more than that label? And this goes the same way back and forth, right? Like, oh, Amanda is a, a leftist, but she wears bras. I don't know, like whatever. Um, if we can start to look beyond that and really start understanding each other as a human being who's not that specific person isn't specifically out to get you. Even if it's a belief you don't agree with, even if it's a belief you don't have, it doesn't mean that they are trying to attack you in the here and now.
Yeah.
Um, I know there's something to be said about, well, if you vote for policies that take away my rights, all of those things. Yes, absolutely. I'm not saying that we give people a free pass, but you don't know where their brain is when they're looking at those things, right? They might be completely wrapped up in a different topic and not even seeing your side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And like we're all the heroes in our own stories, right? Like we don't think of ourselves as a bad person. We think I may have had to do these things because I'm trying to protect this thing. And if we can start to look at each other as who are you trying to protect or what are you trying to protect instead of what are you trying to harm, then we can start to see that humanity again.
Yeah, absolutely. And remembering we are a sum of our traumas, our experiences, our upbringing. And in saying that, that by no means excuses bad behavior, right? That's important to put in there. But it can gain us a better understanding of where that person is coming from and the origins of those wounds. And that is heavy and deep work that we all need to be doing. But it can also help give us a better look at who this is as a person and connect under that humanity.
I have realized that, especially like through my work, because I work with youth all the time too, is I've found that I do have more like leeway and grace for youth in these kinds of conversations, strictly because like understanding like we are all the sum of our parts, and youth tend to have fewer parts to make their sum. So I have a better understand like, oh, this is just regurgitated information that they're hearing from like their parents or their friends are saying. It's like their worldview is much smaller because they don't have as many interactions outside of their school and family and sports. I have a harder time with adults because adults, we've had the time to take in new information, and choosing at that point then to not learn or grow is like that's an active choice. But we have to recognize and try to remember that I believe that they've had the time to learn and grow from this because I know what I've experienced. Just because I went to college, just because I have visited a bunch of different cities and communicated with a bunch of different people because I love talking to people, that does not mean that's everybody's experience. So even if have had more time than children, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've had more interactions and experiences and been exposed to these things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. And that's a bias that I work through each and every day, right?
Yep.
And remembering, yeah, those wounds, that is the wounded inner child speaking. And so when I get really frustrated with someone, I try to imagine, hey, this is little version of them who's probably acting out right now and try to see if that can bring me an ounce of compassion. Empathy doesn't always, but you can try it.
Oh, yeah. And just like that, never gonna be perfect at
Yeah.
this. Like
Never ever. Nope.
we are all hopefully learning and growing and trying to better our relationships and better the conversations we have with people when conflict does arise because it will inevitably arise regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a skill just like anything else. And no matter how much you practice a skill, you're still going to fail at it sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, I study
I
this
watch
every day and I erupt like a volcano all the time too. So
I
two
watch
truths can coexist.
I watch football every weekend, and just as a Lions fan, the past 2 weeks, the Vikings game versus the Commanders this weekend, like those are two very different teams, same players, same skill sets. They just looked very different. So these are professionals at something. They're not perfect at it every week. We are professionals at what we do here. We are not perfect at it every week. And trying to hold yourself to that standard of I knew better and this still happened is not serving anybody.
Yeah.
So then when it comes to looking at when that conflict is arising and when we're kind of on the outside of it now, right? So like kind of like what we were just like what I kind of like what I just said is like it's not serving anybody to say like, well, I knew better and I didn't do good here. Or I wanted to salvage some of this relationship. I wanted to have this conversation and I didn't want this to come off as being harmful, but now the relationship's even more ruptured than it had been. What are some steps that we can kind of take to ease some of that, ooh, I fucked up, or I didn't do super great in this moment? And then how can we work on fixing some of that rupture in that relationship if it is one that we do want to maintain?
Yeah. First of all, do not fall into the spiral of eternally beating yourself up. If you are having these questions, your heart is probably in the right place, right? It's a relationship you want to try to restore. You admit the hurt, the fault, And even if you've already had those conversations, then you're in that place of what comes next. First, I want to acknowledge the scariness and the uncertainty that can come with that, because this is someone you want in your life if you're asking these questions. So if we break it down to the science level, if we look psychologically, what's happening here, because that can really help me to kind of logically parse out things. Repair is activating the same systems psychologically as trauma recovery. It's the nervous system learning that safety can exist again after threat. And that sounds really scary and intense, especially if it was just like a tiny little comment that got misinterpreted or something. But just to know what's going on with us internally can be helpful if someone has like a really big reaction to something that you totally didn't mean in that way and it's a miscommunication and I'm scared. Do not fear. This is just someone reacting in this way because this is what is activated. It doesn't mean that there's not a chance for repair after. So the work in that instance, it's not about erasing what happened, but about learning that you can reestablish trust, both with the other person and with our own capacity to kind of survive that risk. Because in that moment, it feels like there is risk. It's what is this connection going to look like after this? Right. And so it's about staying in that state of openness and understanding. And in these instances, it can be really, really helpful to let the wounded party set the pace of repair. Because if someone is super shut down in a moment, you can apologize all you want. It's nice, but it might not fully get through to them. Sometimes time and a little bit of space is something that's needed. And oh my goodness, I empathize with anyone who feels so much discomfort in that, because I immediately want to heal things. I immediately want things to be okay. Oh, that's not how it works. And that feels so not fun. And I understand that.
Mhm.
But knowing that a lot can change in with time, and using that as part of the toolkit too can be so important to understand.
Yeah, it can be really hard for a fixer to be like, I can't fix this right now, so I guess I'll also just sit with the suck and
Isn't
just
it
kind of,
awful? Isn't it terrible sitting with our feelings? I hate that.
I hate it. I hate it so
I'm gonna
much.
start using the term sit with the suck though, because I liked that. That was a good one.
Coin that, trademark that.
It's
Mhm.
when I use it all the time because like my brain, it the depression really likes to make me think I'm just a shitty person most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right, I'm sitting with the suck,
We're just
but
here.
that doesn't mean I suck.
That's a
And
t-shirt. That's viral content right there. Yeah.
sweet, we have our first merch and for after 5 years, might have some merch.
I'll buy one. I'll be your first consumer.
Awesome. Love capitalism.
Love it. Love it so much. Zero flaws.
Yeah.
This is a joke for those listening.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
But yeah, it's if it is obviously like a relationship we want to maintain, we want to like have this person be around, it's like we have to, one, be willing to admit that, yeah, we're flawed and we're going to cause harm. And that's also really hard for people too. It's like
Yeah.
we don't want to hurt our friends. We don't want to hurt our family members. They're people we care about. Now, if you want to hurt them, they probably weren't your friends or you don't really care about your family. But we don't want to hurt these people. And when we do, that's a really hard thing to sit with. It's like, I did the thing that I don't want to do. I hurt this person.
Yeah.
We're not going to get through life without hurting people. It's how do we take accountability for the harm that we've caused? And then how do we start to reestablish some of that trust? And part of that is taking the accountability. If
Mm-hmm.
my apology is, I'm sorry you felt that way, that's not an apology.
Right.
I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I'm sorry my comment hurt you. I'm sorry that my beliefs were harmful, because that's taking the accountability and it showing the other person, like, yes, I still want to have this relationship with you because I'm willing to admit that I was wrong.
Yeah.
And we all know that's a hard fucking thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think? How are you feeling, Aubrey?
I'm feeling good. I feel like I am ready to repair where repair needs to be done. I feel like I'm ready to take accountability for likely all the stupid things that I've said.
I can't wait to say stupid things at Thanksgiving.
So I'm so ready. I'm ready to be so stupid on Thanksgiving. You know, that's the purpose of this episode, titled How to Be Stupid on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
No, but I so appreciate you both and the opportunity to have this conversation, because this is the work that all three of us and everyone listening to this will be doing for the course of our lives, right? There's no avoiding this. This is part of the human experience. And so it's amazing that we can stay in conversation about this and learn how to have these difficult conversations, because there's no escaping them. All we can do is better prepare ourselves, educate ourselves, and ultimately learn how we can better connect with others. And at the end of the day, that's all we can ask for.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Aubrey. Genuinely enjoyed having you on the podcast, as always. But before we sign out here, is there any final notes you want to leave for our audience?
Always such a pleasure being on. Yeah, if you want to follow me, more of my work, you can find me at www.aubreyAust.com. Also, if you want more bite-sized quips on this stuff, follow me on Instagram at Aubrey__Aust. I post pretty regularly on there, keeping up to date with my research and such, and would love to see you around.
Awesome. I love it when guests steal my thunder so I don't have to ask where they can find you on social media. So thanks, Aubrey.
I got you.
I'll make sure I have links to all of those in the show notes for anybody who wants to check out Aubrey and follow her. Definitely recommend it. It's definitely worth a follow. But thanks again, Aubrey. And thank you all for listening today. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Touchy Subs Pod to keep up to date when we have new episodes and other content coming out. Please email us any questions, comments, or concerns to touchysubjectspodcast@gmail.com. And please rate and follow us on your favorite podcast listening app. It really does help the show out.
And in the meantime, don't be afraid to challenge, ask, and discuss when it comes to touchy subjects.